Welcome to another episode of the I Know a Guy podcast. On this episode, I welcome Lisa Jacques Christo to the studio. She's an Australian native, world traveler, and self-proclaimed Catholic Hare Krishna. She's going to discuss the global impact of Western civilization on the world, how she's balanced Catholicism with the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, and why you shouldn't date an American man. So let's get to it and enjoy the show. All right, so Lisa, thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Ben.
Talk to me. You're from Australia.
I am indeed.
So you're an Australian.
I'm an Australian.
Okay.
I'm an Aussie.
You're an Aussie. Why did when people said Aussies, I always thought somewhere else, but you've corrected me on that one. Tell me what life was like in early Australia growing up.
Okay. Well, I'm a post-war baby, so I was born
Post-war, like you mean World Wars?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. So 1953, late September. So what was it like? I would say that for the majority of us, it was really tough. And it's interesting because I got a different image when I got to the States. I thought you went through a similar thing to what we'd gone through in Australia. But it seems like it became much more affluent in America a lot quicker after the war. Whereas in Australia, I was the oldest of 9 children. And when walking to school, we would have cardboard in our shoes. And school was probably about a mile away.
What do you mean cardboard in your shoes?
Yeah, holes. We'd wear holes in our shoes and we'd have to put cardboard in them.
Wow.
And then when Mum would actually give us the money for a bus, we'd save it so that we could buy some lollies.
Okay, now I gotta cut you off for 1 second.
Sure.
I've learned a little bit about the Australian culture, and one of the things in the language I've tend to learn is that Aussies tend to put words together. So if I were to say good day, you might say good day.
Good day.
And you said lolly. Is that a lollipop?
Yeah. Well, not really. Lollies are just sweets.
Okay, lollies just mean sweets. Okay,
yeah,
all right,
yeah.
all right.
But usually it's the sugar and water type sweets. So, yeah, I don't know what else you. Anyway.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so understand. You save your money up for lollies.
Yeah, for lollies.
Instead of the bus.
Yeah, instead of the bus. Okay, so essentially, it was. In some ways, it was obviously similar to the United States insofar as that we had parishes and, the people rallied around and did support each other. And like in my case, it was the local priest and the nuns. They would actually be looking out for all the children as well. And they'd do things like, let's say from the local school, we'd actually go off to the old people's homes and have choirs. And the nice thing about that is they would always give us cupcakes and things.
Wow.
But also it was really lovely to be part of that community.
So, and you were born and raised?
In Adelaide.
Adelaide.
Yeah.
And that's a bigger city, smaller?
No, it was considered Hicksville.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so Sydney and Melbourne are the major cities.
Okay.
Adelaide was, Adelaide's in the middle there. Down the bottom.
Okay, so it's
Adelaide,
it's in the bottom of the.
Yes, it was kind of on par with Brisbane, which is up in Queensland, which is when you go on the east coast. It's around the bend there.
Okay.
And they weren't huge cities. And the tendency was that when you got to teenage years, you wanted to escape.
Whoa! Let me stop you right there.
But why?
I got to tell you about Bakari Realty.
What's a Bakari Realty?
We're a full-service real estate firm in North Central Florida working with buyers and sellers to buy and sell property.
North Central Florida? Is there a desert there?
No, there's no desert in North Central Florida. But there are a lot of people moving here from the desert and all over the country.
You think you can help me to move to Florida?
I've never sold anything to a cactus, but we can certainly try.
Okay, so I need to know how to get a hold of you.
Well, you can look at my phone number up. It's online. It's also on the bottom of the screen here, and I'll also give it to you, 462-5130.
Well, I'll do that. I just hope I don't stick you.
So you were one of 9?
Yeah.
Does that mean you shared a bedroom?
Yeah, we shared everything. We shared baths. So it would be that, you could only run the water, and everyone pretty much would bathe, not at the same time, but they'd bathe in that same water. So, and sometimes you wouldn't take baths for 3 days.
Would you say in Australia there's a upper class, middle class, and lower class?
All right. Everything has radically changed since my childhood. And, there is definitely a distinction, but not too overt. Because even when I was growing up, one of the suburbs that my mother managed to scrimp and scrape to save to buy a house in was Goodwood. And it was right next to a really beautiful suburb. So you could actually wander around those suburbs, and you made friends with kids in those suburbs as well. So it was, there wasn't a huge class distinction.
And so what's the so I'm intrigued by different cultures, as you know.
Sure.
And Australians, as I've done a little bit of research, that love to travel.
Yes.
Go worldwide.
Yes.
So I haven't gone to Australia just yet. And I've got a family member who's
you'll be coming.
I will be going eventually and going to visit, because you may be going back soon, right?
Yes.
What's breakfast? What's lunch? What's dinner? What's the does the family sit together for dinner at night, or do you go to a friend's? Are there people who take care of each other? How does all that work?
Well, okay. It really depends where you are. Sydney is a very fast-paced city, and Melbourne somewhat similar. But so it really depends on what your lifestyle is, and where you are, which city you're in. A lot of restaurants, a lot of really good restaurants, and they're not too pricey. And also we don't do things like you have to tip the poor waiters so that they get a wage. That's really weird. But so you can actually eat out probably once a week.
Okay.
So not all the time, but you can definitely enjoy that maybe once a week with the whole family. And other than that, people sit down to usually breakfast is. Lunch is obviously on the run because you're working.
Sure.
And then the evening meal, everyone usually sits down for that one as well.
How long have you been in the U.S.?
Okay, all right. I first came to the U.S. in, 2014? I think 2014. Actually, I passed through when I was going to Peru. I actually landed in L.A., and was there for about 12 hours and got a shock then.
What do you remember most? That was...
Well, actually, it was really nice because there was an African-American boy that sat next to me on the bus. And so I chatted away to him, and he was a bit shocked that I was chatting to him. But he offered to actually show me around L.A. And so I went to the marketplace that they have in LA where they sell all the cheap clothes and everything. Mm-hmm. Showed me all around that. Showed me the library. Showed me a few places. And then afterwards I went back to my hotel room and I put on the TV and I saw one of the famous old actresses whom I really loved, and she was in an ad for some like diapers or something. And I was seriously shocked. And I thought, okay, I need to reassess what this lifestyle is here, that they need to do these type of ads. People that you're thinking are very famous and that have actually made it in the world and are promoted that way, but they're actually on the screen doing a diaper ad. So that was a bit of a shock.
And so then you went to Peru, but then you came to America in 2014. So you've been living here now about almost 9 years?
Back and forth.
Okay, back and forth.
Yeah. So, and I also went to India in between because I was helping out with charities over there.
How many different countries do you think you've been in?
Heavens, I probably should have added it up before I
But
came
a lot,
in.
huh?
Quite a few, yeah.
Where's your favorite? What's the best?
Isn't that interesting? Okay, so observational-wise, Turkey.
Okay.
I love Turkey. I thought the people... And again, it could be based on the fact that I'd just come out of India, but I don't think it was solely based on that. But I was so impressed that here was a Muslim country whom we always get told all sorts of horror stories about. And the men were just so gentlemanly. And when they joked, like when you were in the marketplace and they joked with you, it was funny. It was hilarious. I mean, I totally cracked up, but it was respectful at the same time. And beautiful. God, I thought, wow, this is a serious first world nation. This is seriously beautiful. Everywhere you went.
In Turkey.
Everywhere, yeah, in Turkey.
And when you talk about how maybe Turkey or Muslim or countries or men are portrayed, is that something that you would see in the media around the world, or is that just in America?
Well, also experience in India as well. So I'd have to say my experience in India as well. I wasn't. Yeah, I didn't like the way men generally treated women in India.
In India,
so, yeah.
Even you as a visitor, as a tourist.
Oh yeah, no, it was worse. I was really molested in India.
Really?
Yeah, badly molested at so-called spiritual festivals. So yeah, I wasn't impressed.
Wow. You think that's the standard?
I think it's probably improving, although when you heard that story of that couple that were on the bus some years back when they'd gone off to see the movie The Life of Pi, and on the way back, some of the youth actually got up and rammed her with a pole, killed her. And after that, I just thought, yeah. And then you heard stories, because when I was there in the 70s, you would actually, every day you'd hear about wives that their saris caught fire when they were cooking. And really what it was that the husbands or the in-laws wanted to get rid of that wife because they didn't get enough dowry, or they didn't think that they were suitable for their son. So they'd actually literally kill them. And it was happening so frequently, it was terrifying. So, but I think it's improved. I think with the fact that now more focus is on, and that they're becoming more internationally focused upon, and also because they want to actually come up in the world, that there's a modification of that sort of behavior.
Who sets the standard, in your opinion, when you talk about influence around the world?
Yeah.
There have been some countries where maybe Western influence isn't the best, but and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I was born and raised in America, so my perspective is sort of, I don't want to use the word brainwashed, but it's from an American perspective, and that is that the Americans sort of have tried to influence. I don't know if the word's growing up or change of behavior on maybe, you'll see right now there's a big story between the PGA Tour golf organization and the Live Tour with the Saudis.
Right.
And that goes back to women's rights and how they're treated in Saudi Arabia. And it also goes to 9/11, the September 11th attacks in America, where many of the terrorist individuals were Saudis.
Right.
Who influences, do you think, to help a country like India or others? Maybe is there an Australian influence? Is there something from French or China or?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And different influences at different points in history are either detrimental or they're positive. So I know historically that when China and India wanted to know how, and they invited advisors from the United States to actually tell them how could they advance, how could they get further ahead economically in the world. And one of the things they were told was to reduce their populations. So, So, this can be referenced. So I know that there's that sort of influence that's come into play, but I also know that, yes, on other levels, when they're in the public eye, because the persona that we, the developed countries, want to display is that we're very civilized and that we've actually, that we're broad-minded, that we're more accepting of all different types of people. So because we project that, then that's what they see us as being, those sort of influences. But on a more subtle level, or even a political level, there's other things at play. So,
So not going back to India anytime soon.
no, I actually really love India.
As far as the land, so I'm assuming it's a beautiful country.
No, it's fascinating. It's like the best and worst of anywhere.
Okay.
It's really got a profound spiritual background that I find that you find people there that are really unique, very holy, very very knowledgeable, and then you find people that are absolutely ghastly. But yeah, so it's a real. I cannot put it into. No, I would not go in the category of no, I would never go there again because of experiences, because I also had some pretty wonderful experiences there. Yeah, and they're beautiful places there, yes. I mean, up into the Himalayas and, gorgeous.
So one of the things that I have learned that Australians, as opposed to Americans, sort of travel more.
Yes, we really like to travel.
Okay, and so you've done that. Where you've been to Peru.
Yeah.
Where would you say is the place that maybe you walked in with a perception, or you arrived with a perception of what was there, but then were just either taken aback for better or worse?
The greatest one. That's interesting, isn't it? I would say, okay, well, obviously India,
Right.
because I really didn't know what to expect, but I did expect it to be far more spiritual and not as dirty. The US, definitely. That would be my other one, because again, when I was young growing up, I wanted to see the world. I wanted to go to all the exotic countries. I wanted to gain more knowledge of everything. And and I always thought, oh, no, the US is just like us. And the UK. I thought, okay, the US and the UK are just like us. So I thought, no, I don't need to see those places because they're just like us. But actually being in the US, it's nothing like us, really. There's some elements that are there. And I must seriously say I really love the American people. I've really got to say that, because they're so earnest. I really enjoy interacting with them. And I will also say that I like the East Coast better than I like the West Coast. I love the ma'am and the sir and the respect that's actually shown. I do enjoy that. I was shocked by the racism. I mean, we do have racism in Australia. I can't say there's no racism, but my God, it just seems to be everywhere when you're in the United States. I was really quite shocked at that. So yeah, that. And then, of course, knowing the history, then you actually get, okay, I see where this is all coming from. Another thing that upset me is that when I see, all right, this is a bit controversial, but when I see African Americans actually making it, and I think, okay, that's great, but what are you doing for your people? How are you helping your people pull out of whatever it is that they've been pushed into? I don't see your wealth actually going into, you've made it, that's fantastic, but what are you doing? So, yeah.
How much, what we know and what we see.
That was very controversial.
Well,
I'll back on that one.
No,
But,
no,
yeah.
So I think what's important is to be able to say how you feel.
Right.
And I mean, in general, anybody, and be
Yeah.
able to speak. And
Yeah.
what you're offering today is a perspective of, for lack of a better term, an outsider.
Yeah.
You were born and raised in Australia.
Yeah.
You've traveled the world.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of knowledge, which is why you're here. Because we've talked many times about things we haven't discussed yet, and it's
Yeah.
like, wow, you really have a lot of wisdom and experience.
Thank you.
And I think we should all be open to sharing it and going, okay, here's my thoughts, and it's okay.
Right.
A lot of what we see sometimes, I think, is shaped by what we see on TV
Yes.
or in the media,
Yes.
maybe even on social media,
Yes.
and it's not always accurate.
No. No, it's not always accurate.
I played a video for some friends a couple weeks ago, and it was of Anderson Cooper
Right.
on CNN talking poorly about this is the video on Instagram.
Right.
Okay, this isn't inaccurate exactly what happened, but this is what the video showed,
Okay.
and how he was talking poorly about President Joe Biden, and he was saying how here's what your president did. But the video was completely spliced together
Right.
and was really talking about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
But people saw that, and I showed friends, said, what do you
Yes.
think of that? I go, wow, I would not expect him to say that about Joe Biden.
Yes.
The first thought, and
Yep.
this is scary that you have to do this, but my first thought is, okay, well, is that even real?
Yeah.
I didn't accept it at
Yeah.
face value that Anderson Cooper, an anchor on CNN, really said this about Joe Biden.
Right.
I first said, number one, I knew what the context was because I'd seen what Anderson actually said in the beginning
Right.
a few days before.
Right.
But it was, okay, is this even real? And then when you dive in, no, someone just put it together, and it's sort of scary. And
It is.
and I wonder if this is the next level of modern warfare. They're
Right.
talking about propaganda and about how other countries will use and create these things that maybe that's not even maybe that wasn't even created by a real person on the ground here in America,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
a foreign entity, maybe,
Maybe.
who's trying to create some kind of divide. But, I digressed. I was just talking more about the media and how we see all this stuff happening, and black or white
Yeah.
people, for the most part, are kind,
Yeah.
but you get inundated with constant violence and negative
Yeah.
stuff. But
Yeah.
is that something that's on the Australian news? Is that
Okay, that's interesting.
is,
Okay.
does negativity sell all around the world? That's what people want to read and pick up.
If you watch the commercial stations in Australia, I call them lollipop news, because they've reduced it down to 15 minutes of content, and then because they only last for about a half an hour, and so there's like 15 minutes of content, and then after that it's all sports and a bit of weather.
Mm.
And it's like, and their feel good thing is where they saved a dog somewhere. And you go, okay, I can't watch that. That's just pathetic. So I think most people are actually accessing their news from the internet more so than from, although many people still do,
Mhm.
but from your news stations. Yeah, and cross-referencing like you've done.
Sure.
Exactly. I think thinking people actually cross-reference. They don't just look at that. They go, okay, and then they jump on to actually see, all right, well, where's that coming from, and what's the history behind that, and where's the original? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So are you familiar with who Neil Bortz is?
No, not really.
Neil Bortz is a radio figure in America talking, and he's a libertarian.
Right.
And I listened to him, I won't say growing up, probably more around the age of 14, 15 when my older brother started driving. He'd have it on. And he always said it was a Neil Bortz show, and he's the high priest of the painful truth. And he would tell you that every time you listen to what he has to say, verify it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. You even said it earlier today about you made a comment and then you said you can reference it.
Yeah.
That's the important thing, to be able to actually reference and not just bite and be a sheep and follow, but actually try and educate yourself a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know.
Okay, now the next thing is that Australia in many ways is like the 51st state of the US because we have always been hitched to America.
Mm-hmm.
So, and our influences have been very much from the US via the media, but also in our activities. Obviously, we've actually given land where they've gone and blown up atomic bombs and things as well.
Well, there's a lot of land in Australia.
There's loads of land, so why not?
You have it,
Blow it
so
up.
right.
But no, I'm joking.
I know.
Anyway, so but obviously there has been a very strong connection with the US, and most of our movies and everything, have come, but also strongly influenced by the UK. So the UK and the US, and then we have a station which is called SBS, and SBS is actually really good. Although at certain points in history when the Liberals have been in power, the Liberals are actually our Conservatives, which is ludicrous, but the Liberals are our...
So it's back. It's switched, flipped up.
Yeah. So the Liberal Party is our Conservatives, and when they really want to when they want to get heavy-handed, then they just refuse funding. So they start doing nasty things if they think that any particular person or...
So that station in Australia is like the PBS here in America, the public broadcasting station?
No,
where
so SBS is not. ABC is.
Okay.
Ours Australian Broadcasting Commission is actually the government one.
Oh, it's called ABC.
And so they've actually put a lot of... similar to here, obviously the same. But But they put a lot of restrictions on them too, so that they had to actually retract a lot of really interesting programs if they didn't like what they were focusing on. I shouldn't say that. All this stuff is very controversial. But anyway, SBS has always tried to be very international, let's say. It has a lot of movies from different parts of the world, so you'll see all nationalities. It was probably the first one, and I think it did a lot. Like Netflix has now got on with a lot of Korean movies and series, whereas SBS actually funded a lot of those as well. And anyway, but they got a lot of programs in from other parts of the world. So if you really wanted to watch something, you tended to watch SBS. Now, the way SBS managed to get itself in is in the beginning it actually showed a lot of movies that were quite raunchy. So people got addicted to watching those. But then they started really bringing in fantastic content. And so people got addicted to those. So really good documentaries and really good, I think they were doing the one, just trying to think what's the name of it. One of the sites that you would actually go to actually get real news. But they would actually be broadcasting a lot of those different ones from around the world. So if you wanted to hear what was actually happening in that country as opposed to what you were being told in your country, you could go to those news broadcasts and actually go, okay, all right, well, what are they saying about it?
Sure.
So SBS was very good that way.
I wonder if any show is not used. If you think about cartoons, think about kids programming, not used to try to influence or manipulate the way one thinks.
Interesting.
There was a show here in America called Captain Planet. And I grew up watching it, and it was my favorite, right? So I love superheroes.
Right.
And Captain Planet, there was these 5 Planeteers.
Right.
One had the power of wind. One had the power of earth. He could make earthquakes, make things happen.
Right.
One had the power of water.
Okay.
One had the power of heart.
Okay.
Heart, this individual could communicate with animals. So maybe there's a tiger that's roaming the city, wanting to hurt people, but is really just scared, and he could somehow communicate and calm the tiger down and talk to the tiger. The whole show and the premise, the whole premise of the show, which was founded by Ted Turner, was that big cities had lots of smog and development was bad.
Right.
And I didn't know that growing up.
Right.
But when I look back, I see the influence of every show was the same. Here comes developers. Here comes hazardous materials. Here it's ruining our Earth. Here come the Planeteers.
Right.
They're going to protect our planet. Right. And then they put their powers together with these rings that they wear, and there goes Captain Planet up to save the world.
Right.
But there was a message behind that show.
Yes.
And I wonder if there's really any. And I don't want to say it's not authentic. I don't tend to like it. I don't tend to like things that are intentionally trying to manipulate or shape me or kids because they're trying to get some kind of agenda across. Right or wrong.
Right.
It did it so much to the point that I never went to a big city until 1999 and flew into New York City and thought that I was going to see this huge dark cloud of smoke and smog.
Yes.
And it was a beautiful day. Yes. It was blue skies. It was 19. And I'm not saying that big cities don't have issues with gas and smoke. Right. It was gorgeous.
Yes.
And because I was 14 at the time and grew up just a few years before watching Captain Planet.
Right.
And so the way the news, the way media shape thing, and then the politicians are getting involved on both sides. If we don't like what you're putting out there, we'll not fund you anymore.
Right.
So I imagine Australia deals with the same things.
Yeah, same
Talk to me about tall poppy syndrome.
Okay, tall poppy syndrome is pretty much Australians. Okay, I mean, because again, in any society, you're going to have the people that actually want to achieve greater than others who are quite comfortable with their lot in life, or others that actually will strive, but they won't go overboard in their striving to achieve great things. So let's say on an economic level, these are people that actually want to accumulate a lot of wealth. Tall poppies tends to be, what it is when people think they've got a disproportionate amount of wealth. So if they see someone who's ostentatious in their presentation and they really want to show, oh, look at me, I've got the fancy cars, I've got the beautiful homes, I've really made it in the world, Australians don't look kindly on that. they'd rather see somebody who actually, like I really like when I go to St. Augustine and I hear the history of Flagler.
Oh,
Is
yeah,
it?
flag. Yes.
And how he actually established all those different churches and how he educational institutions and I think, yeah, that resonates. That's what we like to see, that if somebody does actually make it in the world, that there's some distribution of their wealth that goes out to assist all those who actually are in need, in genuine need.
Do you think, because a lot of our celebrities do charity
Yes.
to some degree,
Yes.
and
Generally, it's very self-motivated.
okay,
Right? Quite often it's if they're affiliated with a certain group or if they themselves are actually suffering from a certain disease or they've injured their spinal column or then all of a sudden they're really interested in actually investing an awful lot of money in looking into those particular things to assist that particular group, as opposed to it being just a general across the board helping everyone in need.
So in Australia, there's and I know there's folks in America who would feel the same way, that when someone gets too big for their britches,
Yeah.
you bring them back down to earth.
Well, exactly. It's more, again, there are very wealthy people in Australia, as we know. But it's mainly, I guess, if they don't stick their head out, they don't get their head lobbed off. But so again, I think there's a real genuine respect. And I know it's here too.
Sure.
There's a genuine respect for people. And I know it's very much a part of the American culture too, to actually help fellow men. I know that the churches were very much focused on that we should be the ones. And in Australia it was too. My mother told me that the charity organisations, and it was the churches, that actually used to assist all the people. And then the government came in post-war, and they actually took over the Social Security, where they actually had to set it up to be able to look after people that were actually in need, because the churches weren't able to do it greatly anymore. So they had done it prior. But
because the churches rely on donations and
exactly.
and assistance, volunteering, people helping, manpower, etc., or woman power.
Yeah.
As far as we've influence around the world, you told me a story about something that happens. It was in Tanzania.
Yes.
With the clothing industry.
Yeah. Yeah,
See,
that's pretty sad.
Well, it is, but we have to. I don't know. You feel like you're doing a good cause, right? You're giving. You're helping.
That's exactly right. Charity is what is it? Many a good deed
go unpunished.
Yeah, well, that, and also the roads to hell are paved by good intentions. So
What was it? Your daughter that was there, or?
Yeah, one of my daughters. I have two. So one of my daughters is actually she's married to an African American, and him and their three children are actually traveling the world, and she's working. She actually is a paralegal, so she's still working, but remotely, for attorneys in LA.
Okay.
So so it's been since my other daughter and I arrived back here. They then left because they were actually living here. They'd moved over from LA and they were living on the property here.
Okay.
And anyway, so when we returned, they actually decided, let's go off and see the world. She loves traveling.
Yeah.
And so they were living in Tanzania during COVID, and she said that she used to think that it was, that it was really a kindness to actually send all these things out around the world. When you had a surplus. But then she realized that in Tanzania, that all of these clothes that were coming from the Western countries, particularly the US, were to the detriment of the people, because the people actually had a really big clothing industry where they made things from natural fibers, and they made beautiful things. And then all of a sudden they had this huge glut of all polyester clothes, new polyester clothes. That's completely inundated with all this cheap, actually was free, clothes that wound up being mountains of clothes. So they really didn't need to make any anymore because no one would buy their goods. So they stopped. So it killed that industry.
One of the things that I enjoy doing when I've traveled abroad a couple times, and is you like buying the authentic cultural things of that
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you find that the quality,
Yeah.
in my experience, is better than,
Yes.
and a lot of times what you find in America, it actually wasn't made in America. It
No.
was made elsewhere,
Yeah.
but it synthetic,
Yeah.
cheap, and,
Yeah.
plastic. So in that country, it sort of killed their
Yeah. So
economy.
essentially, what we're doing is because we're trying to create economies based on consumption, we have to get in so many articles. So we need to make them cheap. So we ship that offshore so we can get it all done cheap. And then we ship it all back in again. And then we give all the people unbelievable variety. It's like, here, you can buy all these gorgeous clothes and they're relatively cheap because they've come from cheap workers. And then when we can't sell them, and because we've got such an inundation of clothes and shoes and everything else, then then in our kindness, we ship them off to countries that we think actually need those things. But actually, in this case, they really didn't.
It's a balance.
It's a balance.
Well, because if you think about,
Well, again, it's greed. It actually really comes down to greed. If you're going to manufacture that much stuff that you don't need just to give people a variety of options, then there's something wrong.
so we have too much in this country.
Well, in general, and
Yeah.
not just in the U.S. This is in developed countries in general that actually we bring in too much stuff. I mean, I saw it in Australia. It's not like it's just unique to
everywhere.
the U.S. It's everywhere.
Well, you wonder in countries that are not as developed, you think about, I watch a lot of videos on social media that come across where it's a safari in Africa and the tiger is or the lion's about to pounce on some baby
Yeah.
antelope. And it's like, come on, people, can you just yell, like, run? But it's Mother Nature, and you kind of just have to let it play.
Wow, isn't that
And-
interesting? I watched this show now because we got attacked by that neighbour's bully breed, American Bully XL, I think they're called. Anyway,
It was a bulldog or something?
yeah, no, it's a pit bull,
Oh, okay.
all right, and it ran onto our property here in Alachua and ran up the deck and onto the deck, and there's my little grandchildren, and we're inside, and the little grandchildren on the deck, and it jumped onto my grandson's neck and latched on.
Are you kidding me?
And the yeah, no, I'm not kidding. Horrible.
Wow.
Anyway, and so that dog would not let go. That dog had full intentions. Once those things latch on, they don't let go. And so he chomped him. Like my daughter had her hand in his mouth, trying to get him off.
Yeah.
They're so powerful. And I'm holding on to the chain, anyway, absolutely horrible story. But he just kept on chomping down till eventually we had a friend over who had their granddaughter there, and they grabbed a pole and started smashing the dog on the head. I don't know how we managed to get it off because that dog would not let go. And anyway, so we managed, and then my little grandson Narayan ran into the bed, and the bed was all saturated with blood. I mean, actually, it was pretty unbelievably horrendous. And then my daughter, because the dog actually latched on to her and wouldn't let go, and I managed to get it off, and then it somehow or other got me as well. But and then it latched again. It was just beyond a joke. Anyway, when I managed to, that's right, and this friend actually put one of our chairs over that, managed to put the chair over its neck and was just holding on to this chair. Luckily, the chair didn't break. But anyway, because we don't have cell reception out there, I had to run in, grab the phone, and dial 911. Anyway, so they turned up. Eventually, the dog got killed, shot, but the funny thing is that they say, is it your dog? And we're like, no, it's not our dog. We don't know whose dog it is. And they said, well, then we can't kill it.
Huh?
Then we can't kill it.
Really?
And then it was like, well, he can't keep holding on to it with a chair. And so they got a chain around its chain. It was all tagged up. It was, anyway, so they, and then pulled it down the stairs of the deck, and then the dog was still going at them, so then they shot it.
Wow.
Anyway, yeah. No.
Well, I have little girls, and so I know.
So the rest of the story is, since then I've been watching this pit bull awareness program, and practically every day pit bulls are killing babies. People are keeping them inside as pets, and And they say on many occasions, it's like, oh, we've had it since it was a puppy. We've had it for 6-8 years, and then they kill their kids. Anyway, that's enough of my story, but I'm just blown away by that. So you're talking about a story of Africa. I'm saying it's happening in our homes. I mean,
Wow.
it's not, anyway.
Well, I've heard stories, and especially in the neighborhood. Well, the one where I live, it's right now. There was a dog one that's attacking other dogs. It was a pit bull, and people are really going off about that. There's also a couple of there's a fox that lives in the neighborhood, going after little kitties and stuff. And I say, listen, it's my hero story.
Yeah.
I saved a cat. I did. And I saw the fox about 50 yards away watching the cat.
Yes.
And the cat had no clue.
Right.
And then I got out of my vehicle in front of, the cat ran around back. I'm watching the fox come across, and I went knocked on the door. Nobody answered the door.
Wow.
But at least the cat got out of the area because it wasn't going to be good. So, so the,
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we know what wild animals are like. Why would we keep them as pets?
I don't have any.
No.
Yeah, I don't have any. Well, I don't because I'm not going to. Well, my wife, when we had our first baby, she'd had a Great Dane, and they're so friendly.
Yes, they are.
But they are animals.
But they're animals,
and you never know. And that we didn't do anything. She passed away naturally, being older, but still, it's not something we're.
Well, you can't risk. It's more the risk of it, because it's like that story of the Little Prince. Have you seen this? Have you ever read it? It's a beautiful book. It's called The Little Prince. Anyway, in that story, he's on a planet all by himself, and he's got a baobab tree. But anyway, somehow or other, I think he actually comes down to a desert, and he meets a snake, and he talks to the snake, and he thinks he's actually made friends with the snake. And the snake says, "Always watch out for me. I cannot stop my nature."
And that's I don't think a pit bull should be running up people's steps, but they're not a human.
No, well, they're bred a certain way.
Well, some of them do fighting, and they breed them and make them more aggressive.
And they're mixing them with a lot. They're winding. What's happening is they're winding up in a lot of our humane society. What do they call them when you surrender dogs?
Like a shelter or pound or something.
Yeah, so the shelters, and of course the big policy these days is no kill. So the no kill shelters actually get more sponsorship than the euthanizing shelters. So they want to try to protect all these animals. So anyway, so that's happening. So
tell me about, we seem to, you and I have had a lot of conversations. I'm going to try not to say the name right.
Yeah.
Bhagavad Gita?
Bhagavad Gita.
Gita.
Yeah.
I tried.
Gita.
I tried.
You called it the Bhagavad Gita one time.
Did I really?
Mm-hmm.
Gita? Why not?
I didn't try to.
Why not? But a Gita, yeah.
This rat race that we seem to run, and you tell me if I'm wrong, the American culture seems to value success, money, the American dream, achieving, go. And not that there aren't folks in Australia doing the same thing, but for the most part, it's more of a laid-back culture, or no?
Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, I do say that in many ways we are like the United States. We've imbibed. I mean, the US has actually sent out around the world that this is the ideal way to live. I mean, obviously in more recent years they've had more. They show more of what's actually happening in the United States as opposed to the glamorous image that was actually portrayed in the early days. But still, it's there. You come to America to actually, this is where you live your dreams, you know. Like I said when I first got here, you know, living in America. So,
right.
So it's, you know, it, and then, I mean, because I don't want to, I mean, there's so many things that I love about the States. I mean, there's just heaps of them. So we're really just talking about this culture of acquisition and taking more than you need is actually more what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Like even when I watch all these ones that go around the States, and they're showing all these towns now where because the industry was taken away from those places, and as we know, everything's so damn temporary. When you speed everything up, then all that's happening is you've got your IT companies doing it, but previously it was any industry, the car industry, the whatever industry it was. It was always trying to find the place where it could actually make the most profit by being in that particular location. So it could get people that didn't need to get paid as much. It could get people, or just in general, the costs were much less. So it was moving around the states, and then eventually it was like, okay, let's move it offshore. So then it moved it offshore because you could actually run much cheaper offshore, and we did that with a lot of our, as we know, with creating clothes and various things. So we shifted it off to, and even tools and everything else. We shifted a lot of that off to China because China was willing to work for less and give us the cheap goods that we wanted back over here. So, anyway, so we did that. So what has actually happened now is that you've got all these towns that should have actually if we'd actually just kept, instead of getting so damn greedy, if we just kept it so that there was a nice amount of growth, but it was a nice steady growth, they would have continued to prosper, but we took it away from them. So now you've got all these towns everywhere that are more or less abandoned, and the infrastructures are all eroding and closing in on those places, and they describe it as they no longer have the tax dollar. Because the people leave, because there's no industry anymore, the people leave, and so therefore the tax dollar's not there, so they can't fix the roads, it gets worse. Everything erodes until eventually you've just got all these ghost towns everywhere. So you're just shifting around with these ghost towns.
And you do see that. I mean, I've driven around the United States in different small towns, and you see boarded up buildings, and in some places they're trying to recreate and They've created these downtown redevelopment districts to try to redevelop, rethink, reimagine, and they're making them makers districts and arts and specialized things. Even streets where businesses that don't really need the storefront for retail. It's just, when churches are a great thing, but when churches are occupying or renting your spaces on Main Street, your Main Street's not doing right. But that's something small towns are facing all over. Right,
exactly, exactly. So, and it's really interesting because I look at it, because America's beautiful. Right. I mean, America is beautiful. I'll say some sections of Australia are beautiful, but Australia is not really anywhere near as beautiful as America. Some sections are. Sure. Some sections are, but America's beautiful. And so I look at them and I think, wow, maybe they should do something like Cuba. That's very controversial too. But when all the funding was redacted from Cuba, they actually became very, very self-sufficient. So they started to actually change their, even in the cities, they changed their parking lots and different things into farming land. And they started to grow all this organic food, and they really became very, very self-sufficient. They fixed up all their old cars. So you can see all those fantastic old Buicks and all those fantastic old vehicles all driving around Cuba. And I think, well, why don't we do that here? We've got beautiful, like, instead of sitting in these towns actually going, oh, I'm so miserable, there's no work here, we're all in, and there's so much crime, and there's this and there's that because there's no money. Sure. It's like, can't we then like you were saying, reimagine, actually reassign that, because instead of seeing it as we're not like the big cities, we don't have all of these things, see it as, wow, we're in a gorgeous place. We're in a really beautiful place. And actually we don't have any of the pollution as well, and we don't have any, whatever it is that actually that particular place has, its assets, actually going, let's work with that. Let's make a more simple life. Let's be satisfied with what we have. So the Bhagavad Gita. Okay,
Gita, excuse me. The glass is half full, not half empty.
Yeah. So with the Gita, it's really, it describes human nature. Can
you talk about what that is and where it comes from, and maybe the history of it, the tenets?
I can do that. Yeah. I can do that. Okay, so the Gita is a philosophical treatise, and it's spoken on a battlefield, which when a lot of hippies came in contact with that was kind of like, whoa, no. But it's spoken on a battlefield. And it actually takes place in a place called Kurukshetra in India. So again, we know that you can't look at a country today to actually say what it was like back then. That's no way that you can get some inclination, but you won't get the full picture. because it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, there were certain dynasties that actually were reigning the earth and reigning on the earth, and they, what would you say? Although they had ill intent, they still weren't as ruthless as some of the rulers of today's world. But still, they were ruthless. So what happened was there was a cousin, and he actually would not, because there was a cousin, and he would not give to Arjuna and the Pandavas, who were brothers. He would not allocate them some part of his kingdom, although it was rightfully theirs, due to their father. Due to the historical situation.
And where was this taking place?
And so this was taking place in India. So this is all in India. But the actual battlefield where the Gita is spoken is in a place called Kurukshetra. Now that actually took place because after that Duryodhana, who is the cousin, the nasty one, he did all sorts of atrocities to his cousins. And so they always were the peacemakers. And eventually they weren't in a position where they could keep that up any longer, and they really needed to go to war. Now, this is a little bit more complex because we're going to go into, there are certain points in history where God comes down to this planet. He either sends his representative, and there are many, or he sends his son, but he will come down. He'll actually come down. So the Gita, and God is also known by the name Bhagawan. So Bhagavat or Bhagavad Gita is actually the words of God. That's what it means. It means the words of God. So what he does is he's talking to Arjuna, and Arjuna is saying, look, I can't have this battle. This battle is not going to end well, because the women will all be left without husbands. There'll be all sorts of catastrophes that actually happen. They'll be taken advantage of. There'll be unwanted children. There'll be all sorts of nasty things that actually happen if I kill them. And also I don't want to kill them because they're my cousins and they're all my family members. I really don't want to kill them. And he says, you're a warrior. You can't not fight. It is in your nature, and you have to fight a righteous war. And this is a righteous war. This is not just to go in and actually kill people that are actually not doing anything wrong. These are people that have pushed the boundaries to the point where you cannot say, no, I'm not going to fight them, because you actually leave the world in a worse place if you do that. And also by your very nature, you yourself won't be able to walk away from this, because you'll be seen as a coward. And being a Kshatriya, which is a warrior, you will be so humiliated by that, you'll never be able to live it down. Anyway, so he goes into, there's a whole discussion on it. And then it goes into him saying, Krishna saying, you are speaking wise words. It appears that you're speaking wise words, but actually they're not based on true knowledge. And so he goes into the whole thing of we're not our bodies, we're pure spirit souls. We're just in this material world for a temporary period of time. And while we're here, we need to understand our psychophysical makeups, which are attributed to the particular body and mind that we have while we're in the material world. And so we need to understand that and work accordingly. But at the same time, if we're in a human body, we need to cultivate real knowledge of the self. So there's knowledge of us in this physical, psychophysical makeup, and then there's knowledge of the real self, which is the soul. And the soul is consciousness in the body. So the soul is actually the essential self. So he's saying, and he goes into it, and it's beautifully said, but he also goes into how to discern who is a godly person and who is a demonic person. So he said you can judge them by their behavior. There is no, it's not airy-fairy. There's no how do you say it?
Ambiguity?
Yes, thank you very much about it. It's actually very clear-cut. You can tell them because they're very self-serving. They're to their family as well. It's not like they're just themselves, but anybody they like and their family members. They're very self-serving, and they actually look at the world like, so much wealth do I have today? So much wealth will I accumulate tomorrow? You come anywhere near me, I'm going to kill you. Anyway, but even on a lesser level than that they're really just all about the self and any extension of the self. Whereas a godly person is somebody who cares about everything. all living entities. He sees them all as being part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he cares, he's worried about the welfare of all living entities, not just his own family or not even just the human race, but actually all of creation. So he goes into that and he talks about the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, the mode of ignorance, and how we've got to work through these modes to actually come to a level where we truly understand who we are. And then upon leaving this body, we actually go and back to the spiritual kingdom. Now, in that place, it's described that we all have an eternal human form, but we can be whatever we want to be, but we're not trapped. In this material world, we're trapped in our bodies. We can't stop our bodies from being born, from getting older, getting old, and then dying. We can't. We're constantly going through that in the material world. It's like we're constantly, there's 8,400,000 life species, and we go through all of them. We get a trip in every one of them. And we can keep on tripping for however long we want. We can keep on going around in those cycles. So it's a really, really interesting book. Yeah.
If there's, for someone who's Christian and or reads the Bible, but there's some similarities in terms of moral and ethical principles.
Absolutely.
And something that anyone can take from it that may not be
any of the bona fide religions, they all essentially have the same premise, that we're all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and that our goal, and particularly in the human body where we have the intelligence to actually question these things, our goal is to actually work through our lives, act in accordance with our natures, not to deny our natures, because that's another thing Krishna says. What does repression accomplish? It accomplishes nothing. So you've got to work with your nature, but you work with your nature in such a way that actually it's always leading you to become better and better.
You find, as we talk about this rat race in America and anywhere, not just America,
everywhere.
in the world where we want to achieve and go and maybe have millions and
we don't live with the cycles. There's a system also which Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, and it's called Varnashram. And what it is that everyone has a different psychophysical makeup, but also so Varna and Ashram. So Ashram is like when you're a student, when you're a kid, and then also getting married, and then in your later years, because a lot of people are kind of sick of each other.
That happens.
It actually says Vanapras, which means go to the forest, which I find really quite fascinating. So, but in other words, you retire from worldly duties. In other words,
we say
hand it over.
Out to pasture.
Yeah, out to pasture. That's actually a good way to say it. Yeah. So there's that, and then there's also with the Varnas. Varnas are actually your psychophysical makeup. So essentially, what it is it's like a body. So you have a head, which is the Brahmanas. You have the chest and the arms, which are your warriors, your Kshatriyas. You have the mercantile class, or your gentlemen farmers, and they're your tummy, so they feed the population. Okay. And then you have your working class people, and they're your legs. And you can't function without one of. You take away any of those, but the most important one is the head, obviously. But all of them are absolutely essential, and none of them should be discriminated against. Everyone should be seen as being an essential part of the workings of the particular environment you're in.
So I was talking about America and the beautiful parts that I've been to in East Tennessee is kind of where
gorgeous.
That's where I could sit on. I tell my friends that laugh. I say I sit on a rock in the middle of the river, but it's a rounded, beautiful, smooth stone, and it's so peaceful. And I would take it over the beaches, and we've had these discussions about the Gita. Yeah, I'm working at it. It's
Gita's okay. It's Gita, but
Gita. Thank you.
Yeah, but Gita, people do say Gita. So,
okay. Yeah. And when we talk about that and talk about Christianity and the Bible and then
and the Quran,
all of it. But then you talk about about influence and trying to achieve this. I don't want to call it a pipe dream because I do believe that everybody has the opportunity to achieve. But you see some of these superstars, right? Think about Taylor Swift, and I like some of her music. If you just put your mind to it, you can do this too. Yeah. Well, no, actually, you can't. No, you can't. No, you really can't. No. You could be singing. Yes. You could sing in the shower. Yes. Or in your house. Yes. You could sing in front of some friends. Yes. But the likelihood that you, right? If we have 20 little girls who just absolutely look up to her and love her and say, you could do this too, well, that's just not true.
No, it's not true.
But somewhere along the line, you have to find peace.
Yeah.
And
again, that's a really interesting one, because when you come down to, because obviously in the Gita, it's really going into the fact that actually we're getting reincarnated as well.
mm-hmm.
So this impression, I mean, 'cause it really draws on this whole thing of, well, and I think it creates a lot of so-called atheists, is this, well, if God is all good, why is there so much misery in the world? So that also draws on that. It's like this idea that some people are just born and you could be like them too, which I think also comes into play when people look at people who are in poor or abject situations and think, well, that's your fault. So in other words, you should be able to pull yourself out of that. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. They can't necessarily, due to either mental illness, as we know, is a big thing these days, but for whatever reason. There are various reasons. So we as a population, as a country, we should be looking after everyone. Doesn't matter who they are, regardless of what the situation is. But the point of being able to pull yourself up and actually get to a certain level, that's karmic. And what does karma mean? Karma means action. So let's forget about sin. Just karma. Karma means you do something, it's got a direct reaction. It's got a reaction. I mean, we know Newton's law of physics. So, and so many other descriptions of it, as you sow, so shall you reap. It's essentially whatever you do triggers a reaction. It triggers one. So we, in the material world, think that we can actually trick it. We think, oh, no, I can get around you. And you see people that get away with murder. And they think they're tricking it, but no, they're not tricking anybody. They will get it. But if we look at that one particular life, we may think they didn't get it. They didn't get it. Look at them, they got away with it. But that's not how karma works, because the soul is eternal and it keeps on rotating through different bodies. So if you've done something, you're going to get it down the track. You're not going to get away with it. You're going to get it. So if let's say you've murdered somebody and you've got away with that for your whole life, you've murdered somebody, and next lifetime, someone's lined up because they want to murder somebody. Okay, so they've really got a big desire. Let me see, I really like the idea of actually taking someone's life. That will really show that I'm a god. I'm God. And so this person over here who looks really innocent winds up being murdered. Now, I'm not saying don't feel compassion for the person that got murdered. Of course, you feel compassion. Sure. But the point is that it's all lining up according to what we've created at some point in time. It's so complex, it's impossible to understand. But it's really, it works. No one gets away with anything. Any action we do will give us a reaction, which is why God actually everywhere, the Christians have got that idea, the Muslims have got that idea, the Jews have got that idea, the followers of the Vedas have got that idea. Everyone's got this idea. If you surrender to God, if you really genuinely give your heart to God, He can eradicate that karma. He's the only one that can actually eradicate that karma. We can't do it. We'll just keep on going around in loops forever and ever. But He can eradicate it, and that's where that idea comes from.
So, go ahead, Jake.
Why is that something you believe? Is there a certain list of evidences, or is there like a logical argument that you subscribe to? Is it more of an intuition? Do you feel like these things are just self-evident? Like what drives you to get to that belief? Okay,
the existence
personally
of the soul, I would definitely say, is self-evident, because we know who we are. We're conscious of ourselves. So the existence of the soul is. The existence of the body, do you know that your body is completely different after every 7 years? Everything's changed. So we're already reincarnating in this life. We're shedding bodies in this life. So the same thing happens with the transmigration of the soul. So it actually, when we enter into the material world, it is very much like the Matrix, except that we're not stuck in these stupid pods. So we're not stuck in stupid pods. We're actually in the spiritual world, and we've decided at some particular junction in time, hey, why is he the boss? Yeah, I wouldn't mind being the boss myself. So we get to come down and play it. So we've literally gone into a dream state, and that is the playing. So we're in here, and as long as we're entertaining ourselves, thinking, hang on, I'm getting a grip on this. I just have to do this, and and if I just do that, then I'll make this adjustment. I'm doing it all the time. I do it all the time. If I just make this adjustment, this will work better. And if I just make that adjustment. And so we're doing that, and we can just keep on doing that endlessly. But then there gets to a point, because we are sentient living beings. We are cognizant. We are aware of our own selves, and we are thinking, hang on. Why do I'm getting a bit sick of this game. I really want to know who I am. What the hell am I doing here? What is this all about? And am I really in control? So you start making those sort of questions. And then you look into it seriously. And then you look at those sort of arguments that, okay, even in this lifetime, you've actually gone through so many bodies and you're still the same. You are the same person. So what's changing? The body's changing, but you're not changing. So, and then at death, what happens is the subtle body, which is actually earth, mind, intelligence. So we actually have real ones. The soul actually has clear intelligence, clear mind, and anyway, so we have those the soul, intelligence, and mind. So we have them in a purified state in our original self. But when we enter into the material world, we're actually covered by the modes. So the 3 modes are ignorance, passion, and goodness. So they're the 3 modes that govern this material world. So when we enter in here, we're in goodness, because we're thinking, we're so connected still. We're not forgetting that we actually are, in the spiritual world virtually. But we actually get to play out on a higher realm. But then as our desires we get more and more conditioned, and our desires become more perverse, we keep on going down. We just keep on sinking in it. So when we decide, and it says you literally can't remember how many lifetimes you've been here. It's forever. But the point is that you actually do read you do, and everyone does. Doesn't matter which living entity it is. Everyone at some point in time will reach a point where they actually go, what the hell am I doing?
It almost sounds like an allegory for meditation. So far as, we come into existence as goodness.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of get covered by distractions, by things.
Yeah. What is that?
If you've ever spent time meditating, after so long, you can start to observe thoughts and watch them pass.
Yes.
Thoughts, emotions, any sort of trigger.
Exactly.
But then once you do it long enough, the thoughts, the emotions, the distractions sort of stop coming into view. Right. And then you're sort of in like this seat of self, and just you're there, you're aware. Right. You're like goodness again. You're clear of all the distraction. Right. So that's interesting, I think, because if I understand correctly, Hinduism is very it's a big proponent of meditation, and it sounds like its claims on the physical nature of reality are almost like an allegory for meditation. Yeah, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, and it's interesting the word Hindu too, because that's a made-up word.
Really?
Yeah. When the conquerors were anyway, they were on the side of the river called the Sindhu, but they couldn't say S. So they called it the Hindu River, and everybody that was on everyone that was on that side of the river were the Hindus, and then there was them on the other side. I don't know if it was, who was it? Anyway,
I'm sorry for being riverist.
No, not at all. It's just that it covers so much that it's hard to, because again, it's not what they're covering. Again, a lot of information has been lost because. We're really getting into quite intense philosophical and spiritual areas here. When the material world is actually created, it actually comes, it's considered to be like a dark cloud, like a big rain cloud in the spiritual sky. So the spiritual sky is immense, and the material world is actually this big rain cloud in the corner. So that's where we go off dreaming. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so in that particular area, and that's a really good thing to describe as well, because everything we're experiencing here is there. It's not that we all do have a form. We all do feel emotions. We feel love. We feel all all the finer feelings that you can have, all the romance, the pure romance, all of it. It's all there in the spiritual world. And we're up in this tiny corner up there where it's all kind of perverted. So the description is that it's like you've got a tree on the bank of the river and you're looking at the river and you're thinking, oh, I'd really like that apple over there. And so you go to try and take it, but it's just a mirage. But the apple's actually here. You can take the apple and eat it. It's over here on the tree. But so in the material world, it appears that everything is permanent, but it's actually temporary and flickering. It doesn't stay the same. So we can get into a relationship and it can, or even a job. Like I've had jobs where it was just the dynamics were fantastic. I loved the job. And then all the dynamics over time start to change. And it's like, yeah, no, don't want to be here anymore.
You mentioned that your mother was a strong woman and was Catholic.
Yes.
How do you square Catholicism with Hinduism or the Krishna religion and all that? How do you...
All right. With actually the understanding from the Vedas, and I'll say the understanding from the Vedas. So really what people who are actually following this tradition are called Vaishnavas.
Okay.
So they're Vaishnavas, and they follow the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, who manifests in many forms.
Okay.
He actually, because he's God, he can do whatever he likes. But when he enters into the material world, he manifests as Brahma, who's the creator. He manifests as Vishnu, who's the maintainer, and he manifests as Lord Shiva. A lot of people get very attached to Lord Shiva because Lord Shiva's like, he smokes ganja and he's really, he's a far out dude. So a lot of people get really attached to him. But of all of them, he's the destroyer. So people that get involved with him are kind of messing around a bit dangerously. But Vishnu is the maintainer, and that's the hardest thing to do in life, is to maintain. It's really easy to start things. It's really easy to finish things or destroy things, and we see that. Even we see big buildings go up, and they're fantastic for their time. Then they don't maintain them, and then they're knocking them down and putting up something new, like, oh, yeah, this is the greatest stadium you've ever seen, and we're spending billions on it, and, anyway. So Vishnu is the maintainer, and Vishnu is actually Krishna. So Vishnu is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Shiva is considered to be an expansion of him, but in his destructive form. So he actually can do that. And Brahma is a manifestation, but he's actually in his creative form. So what? I got sidetracked there. What was I actually talking about?
I was talking that I mentioned your mother.
Oh, yeah. So my mother read the Bhagavad Gita when she was 18. So I thought that was fantastic. She didn't tell me till years later. She was always a thinker. So she was actually the daughter, illegitimate. Her grandfather was the illegitimate son of a very wealthy family in Australia, very wealthy, owned a lot of the land around Sydney. And her grandfather was then shipped off to New Zealand, where he married, and then my mother, he divorced that lady, my mother's mother, who I never met, and my mother was raised by the nuns. So when she reached her teenage years, she loved Sydney. So she was living in Sydney. She said, all these nightclubs and everything they have around now, they used to be just milkshake bars. So, and not like that song either. So she said it was super cool. But her friend, she was coming to Canada. They were both coming to Canada and the States. So that was their intent. Because Mum always loved, anybody who grew up in the 30s and 40s loved American movies. Sure. All those early movies. They're gorgeous. When I watched Gone with the Wind, I was like, oh, my God, no wonder they love this movie. But anyway, so she really wanted to come over to this side of the world. But her friend wanted to meet up with a fellow that she'd just met. So they went to Adelaide first. So my mum got stuck in Adelaide.
And that's when you...
And that's when she met my father and they got married. But she was always a thinker. So she used to go to the library regularly and read all the books in the reserve library section. And we would have great discussions because she really loved to study ancient history as well. She appreciated that Jesus was a Jew and that all his followers were Jewish. So she didn't appreciate the fact that everyone was so nasty to the Jews. She had a very broad vision on many things, and I could have great discussions with her, and she could reference everything she was saying. So she was pretty amazing.
Because she read up on it and researched
Yeah,
it.
she researched it all.
I know Catholics. Well, I'll say the Catholic view is that other religions, or the Catholic view on other religions, is sort of like the Catholic way, the Christian way, the path to salvation is through Jesus Christ, but that doesn't mean it's the only way. It's more so the most efficient way, at least as far as I understand it.
Yeah, I think
What do you
they've
think
come
about
more
that?
to that. I think they've actually come around more to that understanding, because as a Catholic, we were raised on the Catechism. We didn't actually read the Bible very often. We'd read the Psalms and a few of the really sweet parts of the Bible, but we didn't really focus a lot on that tribal history. So, and it is tribal history. So we focused on the Catechism, which went more into the loving side of everything. And I think as time went on, they became broader in their vision too. So I think they actually started to think, well, okay, we need to listen to others where others are coming from as well, and develop their doctrine accordingly. And you've seen it actually even with some of the popes, that they're really quite broad in their vision and sweet.
And that's controversial.
Yeah, that is not all of them. I'm not saying, of course we know, but I'm just saying some of them. And I had a really lovely parish priest, Father Kelly from Ireland. And so I there were influences that were actually incredibly sweet. And that's another thing that I was really, when I hit the States, that actually when I spoke to people who said they were Christians and they were more or less saying they weren't concerned about other people, that there was this manifest destiny type mentality that this is ours, this is rightfully ours. And I'm thinking, oh, that's funny, I wasn't raised like that. So I took a while to adjust to what that was as well. Now, on saying that, they do many wonderful things. It's not, I really don't want to actually say anything nasty.
Sure.
I love going to any place of worship. I actually think they're all magical. And Rome just blows you away. My God, it's like every corner you turn, you're just like, oh. But it was the same in Istanbul as well. And it was the same, in Asia, when you actually go through the different temples and things in Asia as well. Mind you, Rome was standout. But so I think any place that actually has been it has an energy, because that's where people have gone to actually try to connect with their real selves.
That's
what
what churches are, right?
Yeah, that's exactly
it's
what
on
they
a whole nother spirit.
That's exactly right.
I've been to church before where you're with people, but you feel like you're by yourself.
Yes.
And you're listening to whoever's preaching, but you're like inside yourself listening.
Yes.
Does that make sense, Jake? You're talking to yourself. You're like thinking, and you're like, and it also seems every time the preacher says something, it's like, is he talking about me?
Yeah.
Is he referring to me?
Yeah.
When they're offering lessons or stories, but
They'll talk in horoscopes for sure.
I think he's reading my mind. Someone must have told him that I've been dealing with this, or her. But anyhow,
places.
yeah. Well, thanks for sharing.
No.
You shared a lot of stuff, and I find your perspective so. I don't want to use the word unique because I don't talk to millions of people, but it is fascinating, and you've shared a candid, perspective from an Aussie.
From an Aussie.
From an Aussie.
From an Aussie who actually. All right. Another thing, my children's father is from the U.S.
Okay.
Right. Now, I also based what I thought of American men on him, and it wasn't very favourable. But since that time, I'd have to say no. I love.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you guys are
seriously
warmly
do.
acquainted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What was his name?
Edward.
Edward. Was he? Can I ask if he was a city person or more of a rural
He was a Californian boy.
Californian?
Yeah.
There's similarities between country folk,
Yeah.
even around the world.
Yes. You're right.
and city folk.
Yes.
And it seems that city people seem to be fast paced, higher moving, go,
Yeah.
and maybe even a little more,
Passion.
maybe even a little more progressive in their thoughts on things versus maybe more rural folks who are not. I'm not implying that all city
Yep.
people are this way, but more rural or more.
Yep.
It's a slower pace. You might
Yep.
even get a cheaper dinner,
Yep.
a well cooked dinner too.
Well,
But
because it's interesting because you've got economy of scale. So you've
Mhm.
actually got in cities. Obviously, you've got access to a lot more
mm-hmm,
education, libraries, everything. You've got access to so much more in the city because it can afford to actually
Mhm.
provide those things because of the taxpayers,
sure.
essentially. In the country, then there's not that much. I think the difference is when I'm actually when I'm in an environment like a rural environment that actually appreciates nature, then it feels like there's a higher level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in a rural environment that actually is lamenting that they haven't got everything that from the cities, and they're bitter about it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they turn nasty. You even see that they'll turn nasty, and you'll have high crime and all sorts of silly things
Mhm.
happening because they're feeling deprived. That's when I think, okay, you've lost the point. You really shouldn't be in nature. You shouldn't be in the country, really. But for whatever reason, they're stuck there and they don't appreciate it. Once you appreciate, if you do appreciate nature and you're in nature, then life becomes really quite lovely. It's really pleasant. It's really enjoyable. But again, on saying that, you do need learned people around you. You need intelligent people around you too to be able to put things in perspective.
Mhm.
Because actually life is not easy. So you need those things. And education is actually what really more than anything is what stands out as making people think. I mean,
Sure.
makes them actually broader in their vision and able to think about questions deeply.
Well, I've tried to educate
But
myself.
again, I think that's why that Varna thing is there. I think
Mhm.
that's why when it actually says you go through your study period, you go through your married period or your working period where you're really trying to get
Mhm.
ahead and you want to provide everything, and also you're contributing to society, and then you get to Varna. I think that's when you really properly appreciate being in a forest environment, is when you've actually gone through a lot of the other things.
And you
prior to
can
getting there.
exhale a little bit.
Yeah.
So in Australia, some incredible folks in America that I know I loved was Steve Irwin.
You're so funny, isn't
I
it?
know.
You got your crocodile.
And then you have Keith Urban, who's a country singer,
yeah,
who loses.
who I
he,
think actually is a Kiwi.
he
But,
loses. We talked about that. Do you know what a Kiwi is, Jake?
Yeah, a New Zealander.
Oh,
Yeah.
If
I'm
you
more
don't,
cultured than you, Ben.
you definitely are. Well, don't do that. don't. Are we taping
he's a
still?
thinker.
We
I
are,
like him.
yes.
He's a thinker. You're
Yeah.
a thinker too, but he's a thinker.
So,
Yeah.
Steve Irwin, what's
Steve
his name?
Irwin?
No,
Yeah.
the country
Oh,
singer, Keith Urban.
yeah, Keith
He
Urban.
loses his country accent when he
Yeah.
sings country music,
Yeah, he
but I
does.
like him.
Yeah.
And Steve Irwin, he was such he's a rock star in the United States.
Right.
He died, I want to say, in 06, 7, or 8,
Right.
passed away. But he was a rock star here. I mean,
Right.
he was on, and so he starts on Animal Planet, and crikey, and he's got this
Yeah.
accent, and he's got this awesome show on Animal
Yeah.
Planet. But it transcended more than just that. He was on sports commercials. I remember on ESPN, and it was incredible, and it was
Yeah.
it just really cool. Although he wasn't the first, I think. Was it Crocodile Dundee?
Well, you had a few famous ones. You've also got Errol Flynn. He's Australian.
What?
Do you know Errol
I
Flynn?
don't.
Okay, you got to look up Errol Flynn. He's one of the really famous actors of the when is he? What period? 40s, 50s?
We'll find
Errol
it.
here, he was like the most romantic. Everyone loved Errol Flynn, but he was a total womanizer.
It's not funny. I didn't mean to laugh.
But anyway, yeah, and it's interesting because Steve Irwin wasn't actually big in Australia. So isn't that funny?
Mm-hmm.
He came more into view later, after he'd actually made it in the States.
That happens. It was Tina Turner that just passed away,
Yeah,
and
gorgeous lady.
she had moved
Gorgeous
to
lady.
Switzerland. My brother,
Right.
my family just got back from Switzerland,
Gorgeous.
and they were there when she passed away. They
Right.
just a couple weeks ago,
Right.
and she loved it there because they loved her. It's amazing these artists who can leave America.
Yeah.
Some, now Tina Turner was big here, but some can leave here and go over there and just become rock stars in Europe
Yeah.
that they weren't here.
Yeah, they weren't.
And,
And it's funny, isn't it, how different people actually will find their fame. That's astrological. If you do someone's astrology chart, it will actually say that you will prosper more in a land other than your own birth. So, a karma. That's just called karma.
Jake, we might be leaving. I might be leaving soon. I'm going somewhere else. Well, I appreciate you taking your time to come on here and share your worldly views and positions. Yeah, absolutely. And insight and, that.
Well, you're one of my favorite people, Ben. So.
Oh, you're just saying that.
I'm not.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Jake?
Oh, Jake, now that I've met you, you're one of my favorite people.
Wow. Thank you.
I don't have too many, sorry.
Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
No, my pleasure.
Yep.